Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Community Scrutiny Group meeting. Thank you for everyone for attending on a lovely, warm, balmy evening where Council Manager told me he wanted to be in the pub, but he's here instead. So that's dedication for you. So thank you very much. First of all, we'll go to apologies for absence.
No apologies, Chairman.
Thanks, Laura. And does any member or officer have any declaration of interest they wish to put forward? No, thank you. And on to minutes of the meeting, 22nd July 2021. Has anyone got any comments they wish to make? See, we're flying through it tonight. Okay, I will sign that off shortly then, as a true and accurate record. So before we get into the substantive items, just a few welcomes and an update to everyone as to well, there's a few more different faces around the table this evening. So as at last meeting, welcome Daryl Birch, as Daryl Birch, our lead officer going forward. So welcome Daryl, and you see Dave's straight over there. Daryl's relegated him into the back bench over there. So Dave's here to help us announcements tonight. Derek Hayden, who's leading on a couple of items on communities for us. Inspector Rob Lawton, who's here for our first line police, and welcome Rob. And we've got Councillor Rob Inglis here as well. So invited Rob along to obviously for the first item, and who will be here to take any questions also at the end on policy, as of course that's not for Rob to answer. So then I know Rob's got another meeting to go to straight after that item, so really appreciate your time to come down, Rob, for us this evening. And of course, we've got Laura here taking minutes, and we've got Mark Clifford from the Trembridge Community Trust for our later on item, who wants to sit through and see the whole meeting. So that is real dedication for you. So we'll remember that when it comes to the SRA to come forward, don't we, Mark? Remember that for the dedication. So thank you very much. So that takes on to item 4, which is police performance and resources in Rushcliff. So I'm over to Dave to do a quick introduction first before coming on to Derek.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware that our partnership with the police really is a very key partnership which ensures the safety of residents here in Rushcliff. And really the purpose of this report and presentation tonight is to explain in more detail about how community safety performance has been over the last 12 months. It's clearly been a challenging period with the impact of COVID, and that'll be seen in more detail when we look at some of the crime data that Rob, the new NPI, will be sharing shortly. In addition to sharing that performance trend data as well, we'll also be looking at some of the key priorities we've got across the force, but also some local priorities as well that we have in Rushcliff. Also, just touching on about resource deployment. I know that was a key area that members were interested in hearing more about, and how staff work very closely with colleagues within Rushcliff Borough Council as well. And also exploring a little bit more about how communication and engagement is going to be a key part of the way that Rob wants to work going forwards. Over to Rob.
Sorry, I should have said as well, if members can leave questions to the end so that Rob do his presentation, and we'll just go across the options if everyone's okay with that. All right, thank you.
Right, hello everyone. How are you? My first time here, obviously I started in Rushcliff as the Naval Police Inspector back in July. So it's been a brilliant 3 months learning, getting to meet many of you, still to meet many of you as well. But yeah, I've been here since July. So the presentation is quite data focused, and it's a lot of crime focus as well, because that's where a lot of our data and things like that will come from. And also in the police, what won't be in here a lot will be around the hidden work that we do. And there's a lot of work around vulnerability, and there's a lot of work around, say, for example, missing people and things like that. So that won't be covered necessarily in the presentation, but we can still talk about it. But I just wanted to mention it because that is a significant part of the work you do. So onto the presentation then. So at first bit, I'm going to run through a little bit of data, but what I've decided to do is split it down per area. Again, I'll take questions at the end if that's what people want to do, but I've tried to split it down per area. So you'll see the wards, they're all on there. I won't dwell on it too much because there can be a huge amount of data, which can get really, really confusing, certainly for myself as well. But I'll split it down to the wards as best I can. But for an overall, looking at data and crime trends and where we are with things like that, it's fair to say at the minute it is quite difficult to assess because of the pandemic, because of COVID. So where we are in 2021, it's very difficult to compare that to where we were in 2020 for the obvious reasons. Crime patterns, crime trends changed significantly because of the pandemic. there was lockdowns, people were furloughed, people were at home. So as you can appreciate, certain crimes may have dropped, other ones may have increased a little bit, but certainly what it does, it makes it very easy, very difficult to have a benchmark of something to compare 2021 to 2020. So what I do is I'm looking at the best possible previous to that, which is the crime data around 2019. Now, it's not absolutely accurate, but that's my best comparison I've got at the minute as a benchmark between the two. So, for example, in 2020, antisocial behaviour increased quite significantly. But as with everything, I'll put a context around that if I can. So antisocial behaviour increased, but that was a significant proportion of that would have been around lockdowns, how we responded to certain events, parties, self-isolation. Many of that work or many of those responses would be classified as antisocial behaviour. There was the usual antisocial behaviour in there, but if you see the increase, and it was quite a bit, a lot of that would be because of the pandemic, and that goes back to it's actually very difficult to assess the now 2021 data with 2020, because we are now starting to show a decrease, which is good. We have to be fair and balanced across and look back at 2019 to give a fair reflection. But when I do look back at 2019 from 2021, we are showing slightly below. There are areas which are slightly above, and it's not quite as easy just to say we are always below, as you'll see from the data. Other areas, some areas slightly different to that, other areas are below. Not hugely below, but in some we are tracking below and not too much higher. So yeah. So over to the first one, which is, well, I said, as I broke them down per ward. So Bingham and Trent, this map will show a very rough guide of the hotspots. So what it's basically showing you there in a very basic way is on Bingham and Trent where your hotspots around crime data will be. So you've got Radcliffe and Bingham. So the areas that you may well expect where there's more people around. Next one, please. So here I've put Bingham and Trent for the last 12 months. So on the left there with the crime per month, you can see over the last 12 months how it can go and spike and not spike. A lot of that is down to pandemic. And you can see now that in Bingham we're starting a slight increase, but that'll give you a bit of a guide over the last 12 months about what's happened and how difficult it is to assess sometimes because of the pandemic. On the right, over the last 12 months, you'll see the offences broken down. You'll see antisocial behaviour, like I mentioned, is there at the top with violent sexual offences and criminal damage. But if you go down to the bottom as well, you have got things like robbery, possession of weapons, drugs. If you actually look, they are very, very low. I would always say one is too many, but if you look at some of those at the bottom, like robbery and those, they are low when you look at the figures. Again, Bingham and Trent, last 3 years. Again, it's not quite as up and down, but you can see the trend from 2018 through to 2019, that July, September, slight increase, where we were now then March, January, sort of March, where we started to lift lockdowns. We have started to go down a little bit. Now, again, in context, we've had summer, we've had lockdown easing, summer, furloughs ending soon. So those were furloughs ending. So again, it's very difficult to predict at the end of that scale around April, sort of June into now, where we actually go. So are we still on the decline, like antisocial behaviour? Are we going to plateau, increase? So still waiting to see to a certain extent. Same thing, and it's the same for all of the areas. Cotgrave will show, Wiverton, that will show you the hotspot areas. And as you can imagine there, you've got the slight increases around Cotgrave area. If you were to zoom further in on the map, to give you some more locations and those sort of crime areas, but basically what it shows you, you can see where the concentration is around some of those offences. And as you go a bit further afield, they start to reduce. So that will be in a month period. So we're not talking over 12 months, that's a month. 12 months again, slightly different. You can see some of the different patterns coming in for different areas now. And the slight ups and downs again. What is consistent is there are ups and downs for the last 12 months for the obvious reasons. They just differ in how those peaks and troughs happened. But on the right again, over the last 12 months, you can see antisocial behaviour again at the top for some of the reasons I have explained, and then the violence and sexual offences and criminal damage. So there are patterns across the whole of Rushcliffe in the sort of order of those offences. And again, for the last 3 years, again, you can see similarities in the offences. And what that would perhaps suggest is that COVID hasn't changed the actual offences that are on the right. It's just there are slight differences and ups and downs, and when they happen. And then on the left again, you can see the three-year mark, not quite as up and down as some of the other areas, but you can see those slight increases and then the levelling out pattern again that we're seeing. Leek and Keyworth again, you can see the concentration around East Leek, and while Keyworth, once we start to go out a bit more rural, you can see that they are reducing. Now, that's not to say that 5 gives us the exact picture of the area. I understand that, because that's just a crime figure. What that doesn't tell me is the vulnerability that's in the area. That, if I'm being really honest, doesn't tell me if people have got the trust in me and the police to actually phone in and let us know. So they are figures, and I understand they are figures that I sort of present, but they don't give us the full picture of actually of what that area is. And as I'll go on to later, that's why certainly trying to get out to the areas to find out. Thank you. So again, in the areas, again, you'll see a slight difference at the top end of the graphs there. But again, the top 3 are very, very, very similar with antisocial behaviour and the violence and sexual offences, and then the criminal damage. But again, if you look at over 12-month period, and as we go down to the bottom, really, really low figures around some of them. But again, like I say, as a caveat, one is always too many, but they are. And then we have the 3 months for Leek and Keyworth, and you can see there again, without me going over it again, the patterns for the last 3 years. What you can see is, as we go to 2019, what is very clear on this graph is the clear ups and downs of COVID in the last sort of 18 months or so, and that complete unprecedented time. So the crime rates here are reflecting where we've been in society for the last year or so. In Bruddington, again, a big area, so you'll see very, very similar data. The concentration for that month was 53 offences, and if you zoom in further, it'll give you the areas where they happened. And the graphs, again, the patterns similar on the Bruddington side. In the month, you could see the third now vehicle crime, criminal damage and arson is still on there, but vehicle crimes now within the 3 there. But again, the violent sexual offences and antisocial behaviour are also there. But if you put it in context, again, the graph is 0 to 150. That's in the whole year. There we are for the 3 years. There's one more, which is West Bridgeford, but as you can see, that crime pattern again with the graphs very up and down. And West Bridgeford. Concentrated, you can see the areas around the central West Bridgeford where the concentration is. You've got the higher crime levels, but again, there's more people there as lockdowns ease in. We've got more people coming out, and as you'll see the trends in the graphs, as people have been in lockdown, it increases. It's a busy area where a lot of people within Rushcliff are going to be, and that's reflected there. But when you look at it, there's other theft in there, but again, some of the similar offences there in a similar order, which is reflected across all of those slides in Rushcliff. So after the rundown of the areas, a bit around the antisocial behaviour, pretty much most of it I have already mentioned, and it does follow the almost crime trend pattern. It's difficult to assess at the minute, because of the data from last year where there was the increase because of the increase in calls. So again, if we go back to 2021, we are showing a slight increase on sort of pre-pandemic, sort of 2019 levels. But again, it's difficult to assess at the end of those graphs where we currently are. So we have had a decline on 2020. What I don't know, and what I can't say to you is what's now going to happen to that graph, that decline plateau. So yeah, but we are showing reductions on 2020. But to be fair, the context around that is. So on to priorities then. So on the left-hand side, we've got force priorities. So we've got serious and organised crime, cyber and financial crime, knife crime and serious violence, counter-terrorism, domestic abuse, stalking, harassment, sexual offences, and serious acquisitive crime, which include car thefts, burglaries, sort of things. On the right hand side, you've got the Rushcliff Priorities. So the Rushcliff Priorities are set for a 3-month period. They're set in partnership with colleagues at partnership meeting, and we decide on the priorities for our Rushcliff area for the following 3 months. When I come back from my leave, we'll have a meeting pretty much as soon as I come back, because they're then renewed from October for 3 months. So the current ones, up until still as we speak now, are rural crime and antisocial behaviour in Cotgrave and Ed Walton. And at the meeting when when I'm back from leave next week, we'll have a discussion around what the next, if there are changes, and if there are changes, what those changes will then be. What is important, and you'll see that I've started to put it in my blog, is actually letting everybody know and how I do that. Because it's okay me doing those priorities, but it's important I let yourselves and communities and partners and everybody know what they are. So you'll hopefully start to see them in my blog and my communications that will start to come up. So a bit about my team then. So Naval Policing team is made up of 2 sergeants. I've got 10 police officers, and I've got 8 community support officers, and I'll break that down a little bit further on the next slide. I also have an Operation Reach team, really grateful to have one, of a sergeant and 6 constables. I have a managed incident team, which has got a constable and 3 police staff investigators, and it's the managed incident team that will contact victims in Rushcliff if it doesn't require a police officer to do so. And split that down a bit further. So West Bridgeford, based at West Bridgeford Fire Station, is a sergeant, 5 constables and 4 PCSOs. And the same at Cotgrave is a sergeant, 5 constables and 4 PCSOs. And within those numbers, we've welcomed 2 new officers recently. One for West Bridgeford, who's got the West Bridgeford Trent sort of city centre area, Matt Holden. And very, very recently, over the last couple of weeks, we've got PC Kai Kemish, who's recently started and will be taking over at Ruddington. The communications might not have already come out, might not have come out as yet. That's still in the process because Kai has only started. But again, in the social media, in our reports, our website, blog, you'll start to see an introduction to them. And I know Matt's already been out and about on the area. And then my Operation Reacher there, based at West Bridgeford, will cover the whole of Rushcliff, as well as some other force commitments. Thank you. So since I started in July, the team have been out and about, been very busy, which is great to see. In fact, the top picture there, top left, is actually Matt Holden, the new Naval officer there, doing a walk about in the area, which is something that really keen to do. So, and that's not in the next picture as well. The team over at Home Pierpont, bottom left is a drugs warrant raid in West Bridgeford. Next to that is a speed check in Plumtree, and we've committed to a higher number of speeding operations per month, of which that is one of the most recent ones. Hopefully people have seen our efforts around West Bridgeford High Street under Operation Botanical, being helped brilliantly by Rushcliffe Borough Council there as well. So a real good partnership approach around West Bridgeford High Street. And the one above that just shows the teams that I'm asking to come and help us, because I have my team that I've shown you, but actually what I ask for is help from force resources. So there is the knife crime team, which I've asked to come and give us a help with, give us a hand and patrol the area and their proactive skills. We had an operation in the rural areas on the 15th and 16th of September. That's where our operational support and tactical support groups come with our advanced vehicles and help us with things like that. So it's bringing other officers into the area to give us a hand in what we're doing. Those things will be going on to social media. So I wanted to find, and I mentioned this in a previous presentation for anybody that was on it, just a few simple things as my real personal commitment to everybody. I will always be honest with everybody. One thing you will always be able to see, even if we sometimes agree or don't, I will always be honest with you. I will listen, and I generally will listen to people, and hopefully the people that I've met already will hopefully say that I do that, even if that listening is if people aren't happy with us or frustrated. I still want to hear what people want to say. Around communication, it's really important we communicate what we're doing. So you'll see my vlogs, you'll see an increase in social media, you'll see that the team will be contactable, we'll have their details, we're making sure the intranet site's up to date so everybody can go onto that and get their details. It's taking a bit of time to make sure everything is correct because it needs to be. I'm going to reinvigorate stakeholder reports and things like that. So I want to communicate what we're doing. And getting towards the end now, I've worked in the police, I've had a great career in the police, and I've been very lucky. And at times I've also been very lucky to work with a number of partners. So it's just a slide just to reinforce and hopefully reassure how important I do genuinely, I'm not just saying this, genuinely want to work with partners, whether it be colleagues at the council, whether it be in the parishes, community, and obviously elected personnel as well. So it's just a slide to reassure how I do genuinely want to work with everybody. And that should bring me to the end.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Rob, much appreciated. So open the floor to questions. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. Rob, in all your slides, various areas, I mean, antisocial behaviour is prominent, and it seems to be the highest all the way through. When you drill down into that, is there a specific age group? Is it right across the board? Is it mainly youths that are causing the problem, or is it pretty general?
So it's to give you an exact answer would take some research, as into exactly where, when, and what. But it is quite broad. It's not specific to anything. You know, certain areas will report certain things, and that will be, as you've seen in the graphs, that will vary between areas. It would vary between Rushcliff and other areas within Nottinghamshire. So to give you a specific on exactly what is happening per area is really, really challenging. As I get more experience in the role, maybe I'll be able to give you more info around that. But from my experience so far, it can change. It's changeable. It can change during the summer months to the winter months. There are different things happening throughout the year. So what is important around antisocial behaviour is that anybody suffering or anything like that calls us and lets us know so we can come and do something about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mander.
Thank you, Chair. Hello. Thank you for the presentation, really, really useful. I picked up on the financial cybercrime bit. So like many people over the last year and a half, I've been working from home. One of the things I've noticed about 6 times a day, if not more some days, get scam phone calls. And they're very persistent. They are always after passwords, after installing things on people's PCs and so on. Now, I'm fairly tech savvy, but I'm aware that a lot of people out there aren't and may be frightened or taken in by these things. I know there's the call barring service, but it's quite limited, and we often get people ringing up pretending to be from call barring as well. So I was wondering, what's the most effective way that residents can deal with it, and how can we as councillors best help you to combat this, because it seems to be very much on the rise?
I think I've been asked this question before, and I think one of the big things for us is if somebody, because you can get a lot of advice on the internet. I know that it's such a huge topic. You can get a lot of advice on the internet through phones or wherever it may be, but that wouldn't be for everybody. And there may be vulnerable people within our communities that wouldn't look on social media or internet. So the biggest thing I would encourage people to do, if they can, is ask, speak to us. If they feel they can, speak to the community officer. We and my team more than happy to come out and give some advice if somebody can't get that from the internet or social media, because you're right, it is a huge topic, a daunting one, a scary one, all those sort of things. But there are certain things on the internet that will be a first port of call around guidance, what we know, passwords and all those sort of things. So it's such an enormous topic for me to give an answer around exactly what we should do here and now is a challenge. But it's a really good point you raised that over the coming months, that's something we could perhaps have a look at and then put something out maybe together.
There's been, they've answered this point, and there's work with councillors as well in this matter.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, just to add to that, members might be aware that I sit on the Safe and Ops Board to represent the Borough Council, and part of that is I also lead on an action group that's looking at fraud against the vulnerable. So we do have a fraud against the vulnerable strategy in Nottinghamshire, and the action group that supports it covers training standards, the police and other councils, victim care, so a wide range of partners coming together through an action plan to try and tackle it. And it is, as you say, a significant problem. So it's been around a 340% increase in cybercrime over the last sort of 12 months. So it's been a significant jump. So one of the key areas that we're trying to do is to promote the simple messages. So around take 5. So if you remember seeing the hand message, that's a really important one that we just keep pushing out and explaining to people about, look, just take 5 and really double check what it is you're pressing before you press it. Also promoting the tell to as well, because if you've had an experience about or indeed being a victim, is then how do you then talk to other people about that and get support and tell other people about your experience and be brave enough to do that. That's something we want to encourage as well. So we've got other actions as well. So Councillor Inglis is our SCAM ambassador. So again, that is something which we want to try and promote and encourage, you know, that educational piece across all members to be encouraging and working with their local residents and groups. And how do we engage with people like, it's not called Neighbourhood Watch anymore, but those community groups that exist. How do we get them not just reporting crime, but also spreading the message that I've just described as well? So there is a lot of work going on there, and we're working in partnership to try and tackle it, but it is a significant task.
Thank you. That's very useful. And as I said, it's something that is massively on the increase, and we need to be very vigilant about it. And I think they're helping to reassure people who are quite frightened by these phone calls. It is a big thing. It really is.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Mander. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thanks very much for your approach and your information and your presentation, and your staff coming out and meeting people, which is great. I've got another question for Dave after you, but my first point really is it's very interesting seeing the crime figures, but what we also need to see is the detection figures, and that would be very interesting in any future presentation, I think. I don't know if you want to comment about that, but I'll lob the other ones towards Dave, which is the thing you've just mentioned about advice and information and what the 5 thing. I'm not aware of that being pushed out through councillors, and maybe I've missed something, but I think there's various community groups, if not parishes, that people are in touch with, who could make better use of some of that guidance. And my last question really is, why is that? What's the financial implications of the report? So Safe and Ops Board, Police and Crime Commissioner is doling out virtually 25,000 to the council. Why is that, and what use is it being put to?
Okay, so obviously I think there's one question there for Rob, then we'll pass over to Dave, if that's okay. And I can't think this might want to come in at the end if today, but she wants to take a voice, if that's okay. Thank you. Well, I say he's got to go make his new badge now after that title given to him by Dave. Absolutely. So that's Lawton.
Yes, no problem. So it's my first one, so more than happy. I said I listened, so feedback for next time. Then yeah, I will make the presentation. What is for yourself? So yeah, no problem.
I think that's perhaps behind one of the earlier questions as well, which is knowing how many are repeat offenders, knowing any profile, but also knowing how successful the police are in detecting who's causing.
Okay, no problem. Dave, back in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, Councillor Jones, we have pushed information out and shared information with all councillors. So happy to do that again and keep promoting it, because frankly, I don't think we can do it often enough, really, because I think it's so important just to keep pushing out these different messages and raising awareness. So happy to take that away as an action and do that. In terms of the actual funding, so each year the Police and Crime Commissioner gives out a certain amount of funding to community safety partnerships. So we're part of the South Notts Community Safety Partnership. So we get about sort of, 70 to 80,000 pounds, which we then split between the three councils, so Gedling, Rushcliff and Broxtowe. That money goes towards funding an action plan, which we develop each year in consultation with our police colleagues, and it's around undertaking action. So, for example, when you've seen Judith, our community safety officer, going out doing all the bike marking, things like that, the shed the burglaries, this kind of stuff. So it's a very very important funding pot that we use to help promote our sort of proactive projects about community, crime reduction, really.
Gary. We'll just add in your action at the very end. Rob, makes more sense when you write in one of those bits as well. Rob's question there. Councillor Walker.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Rob. Keen to understand a little bit more about the sort of 3 monthly Rushcliff priorities. If an area becomes a priority, what does that translate to in terms of action? So if rural crime is one for this 3 months, if it stops being one for the next 3 months, what does that mean for rural crime?
Yeah, no, good question. To be fair, probably should have covered it. It doesn't mean that we stop looking at rural crime, but I have to look at certain priorities within the area. So I wouldn't preempt what we would talk about at a meeting, but we would look at, I have to look at what are the certain priorities. So where do I put my resources? Where am I being told that I really need them at the minute? What that doesn't mean is that I stop looking at other areas. So for example, there might be things happening in West Bridgeford, there might be things happening in certain other areas. Daily, I deal with a lot of things. The thing is, I can't call everything a priority, because if I call everything a priority, nothing's a priority. So I have to have a look at certain things where I say, right, I want to make sure that these are the top things that I'm being told about, the harm within community, whatever it may be, and they are the things that I will look at and communicate to everybody. What sits below that is my constant everyday work, where I sit down, I review incidents, I speak to yourselves, I review them with my sergeants. So I have priorities, but then in the background, we still deal with them as priorities. I hope this is making sense. If not, tell me. But daily business still happens in the meantime, and responding to many things that happen.
Okay, so if I've understood that correctly, then, so let's say rural crime, the first one I wrote down, that stays on the list for next time. For next time, then you'd be speaking to one or some of your officers, say this remains a priority. What went well in the last 3 months? So we need to concentrate on it in a particular way. And you'd be looking, is it fair to say that it will be expected that you would deploy more resources in that area for that topic than if it weren't on the list?
It may be, but, and I haven't got an example for this, but a priority wouldn't maybe always need extra resources. It may not. Some of those that you'll see on there may need extra resources. Some of the ASB actually might need a bit of communication with the local businesses, with engagement. So it can be resources, but it can be many other things as well. It's not as simple as just saying, right, there's a priority and it's resources. It's actually, they're the things that we will be looking at for a 3-month period. From a leadership point of view, I have to be clear with my teams. What is my priority and what are our priorities for these 3 months? But to be clear as well and reassure you, that doesn't take away daily business.
I get that. One last thing, if I may, just on I think it kind of is linked. It might not be one for you, it might be for the other. So, John, could you just help us understand the process around that selection? So, if we as community leaders, for want of a better phrase, feel that there's a particular thing that we like on that list, what would be the best way of us going about that, evidencing it? I realize it shouldn't be the person who shouts loudest, right? There should be things there. And I suppose particularly in mind at the moment, for obvious reasons, would be the violence against women and girls. I think what I would say is, notwithstanding the very high profile things that have been in the news recently, you know, it's you'll be aware that the vast majority of instances of that regard happen in a domestic setting from partners, and let's face it, male perpetrators against women. So I'm guessing that's something that you guys are talking about at the moment internally, and are there any, you know, have you got any particular measures coming up to look at how it's being policed in Rushcliffe?
Well, organisationally, I can't comment on that, but what I would sort of say as well is, my neighbourhood team and me, what I do is I look at, from a community point of view, the harm, the vulnerability. I look at Rushcliffe, and I own Rushcliffe from an everything point of view. But we still have other officers on the area. So when you're looking at domestics and violence and things like that, we have the response teams that are based out of West Bridgeford and Cotgrave. So it'd be likely that they would attend that. So it wouldn't always be your neighbourhood officers that would be at those incidents. More longer term, more likely to be your neighbourhood officers. But for your initial response, it's likely to be your response teams, because they are on duty 24/7 at these bases. So at the bases, I haven't mentioned them because they don't come under my command, but they are still there. So sometimes, even if you don't see the officers, it doesn't mean they're not there. They're not mine. They're a different department, but we'll still be responding to them. So.
Yeah, I think when we speak to Councillor English at the moment about the pricing, that's really important to give the government level. We'll raise that again in a moment, if that's okay. And the Councillor, there we go.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. In addition to the police response, shall we say, to violence against women, the Police and Crime Commissioner funds Juno Women's Aid, who provide a lot of support work, as you can imagine, across the whole of the county. And so that's commissioned on a county-wide basis to make sure there's a lot more proactive work and support work that's going, and indeed promotion work as well. And they also fund Equation, which is around male domestic violence as well, and support for that aspect too. So it's very much a partnership approach, if you like, rather than just it being the police's role.
Okay, Councillor Bansal.
There we go. Right, thank you. Great presentation, and again, I recommend. I've been out. We did a wood walk, and it was great. If you get the opportunity, I thoroughly recommend it. If you can, we had local residents coming up asking questions. One of them was about e-scooters. Do you remember that one? Yeah. One gentleman nearly got knocked over by an e-scooter and wanted to know what's the law on e-scooters. You can ask that later, because it's a bit of a complicated answer.
What's set up there, probably. Remember that he's committing a crime. Fuck him off. Yeah.
2 questions. One following on from what Councillor Mander asked around cybercrime. So there's a lot of it happening. We're doing it as much as we can. They're becoming more and more sophisticated in how they're attacking, through emails, letters, replicating raw mail. You've got a letter, send us your bank details, things like that. Whilst we're trying to educate as much as possible, I appreciate social media is good to communicate on, but a lot of the elderly probably don't use Facebook as probably someone like Jonathan, maybe, you know, or others. What else can we do to get that message out to those groups of people who don't actually actively go onto the internet or look at social media, but are still targeted? And the second question is following on from what Councillor Walker was saying, but in a different way. There's been a lot of events, well, one major one in London around women. The trust has kind of gone down a little bit with the police. Not so much here, I don't think, but to anticipate that, are all our officers uniformed? And is there any advice we could give for women who might be walking, might be approached, that kind of information? I know there's probably national guidance, there's been some information, but is there anything locally that women could do to be protected or helped?
You're right around the national guidance and the organisational guidance. We'll see what happens with that. But I think it's doing everything we can. So we talk about, I guess, police officers. The majority of police officers that you will see will be in uniform. So either dressed like I am or in a uniform. They'll have their epaulets on, they'll have the warrant card on, things like that. And it's always okay to ask, see a warrant card, can I see your collar number? There may well be officers around that we don't see, that are more plain clothes. We'll have CID officers that aren't, that wear uniform. We might have people who work for the police who, again, aren't actually police officers, staff members who don't, but still work for the police in police organisations. So around uniform, yes, a lot will be in uniform and very identifiable. They will carry warrant cards like I will have on me now, so you could always ask me to see my warrant card, and that will be exactly the same if stopped by a plainclothes officer as well. That is something we will always carry.
Councillor James,
Councillor Walker's question about the safety of women led me to think, and this is for Dave really, you mentioned that there's a county group. The problem isn't women, the problem is men and boys. And the question is, what can the education authority, although it's not in control of most of the schools because of blooming academisation, but what measures can be made to add to the social education of boys about behaviour? Is that part of that group's remit? And if not, should it be?
Thank you, Chair. I don't believe it's part of the remit of that particular group, but obviously the County Council are a key partner in terms of Safer Knots Board. In fact, the relevant director, Colin Pettigrew, sits on Safer Knots Board. And so I think it's something we can take away and ask the question. But obviously, Safer Knots Board doesn't control the national curriculum that should be followed, and it's how do we best influence that, I guess, at a national level.
Well, it's still possible for local initiatives, I'm quite sure, and if heads are encouraged in a particular direction, maybe they are already, for all I know. But I just think it needs raising at the county level.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jones, and Darryl's taken away his action. I mean, I know with my other hat on, the Councillor Berger, I'll be saying the same, that a lot of work does go into it. The officers do work with schools, and I know that even the police have gone into schools to do some work as well as other priorities, and there is a safeguarding team that goes around and do lessons. But I think it's, as we all know, it's a life lesson that we put through to ourselves and the community, that we need to be self-policed this, and actually we make sure that people are standing up, in terms of parents teaching their own children and teaching their people they're responsible for, because we can't put all the blame onto teachers. I'm sure if we not blame, but also if we ask teachers to teach everything, then they'll never get anything done, would they? And I think there's a moral responsibility of anything we can do as council on a table to that way, and we'll look at what we can put the county council on. And
but if Sure Start got more support, that would have an impact. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's parental responsibility ultimately, but women every 3 days.
no, absolutely. I've just been Derek, who obviously did this role.
It's just something that we might touch on in Mark's presentation about health relationships and some of the work that he has done with positive futures in children and young people. So it's something we might touch on in the next presentation.
Okay, thank you. It's an awesome indicator to speak, so I'll come in my bit. So Robin, absolutely, as Councillor said, a great presentation, and I think also you've had a busy time since you started. I know, I mean, obviously, I think after about 2 days, wasn't it, when we were having a constant discussion about an issue in Hampton, and your dedication and taking calls at stupid hours, and obviously ringing me back at stupid hours of left your message was absolutely great, and the work you did, and obviously Councillor English as well, which I'll thank later on. I think the main point for me, really, you touched on it around the community policing, about an officer for each area. And I think that's something that's key, I believe, to that relationship, is to make this for ourselves as councillors to know the local officer. I know it's getting the right balance, because when we used to have officer details off the notice boards, you're getting people 999 emergencies, ringing the officer who was on their 4 days rest day and then wondering why no one's responded, etc. But We touched on the officers in certain areas, and even if there is an area about an officer at the moment, who they go through, because sure, you don't want 44 calls from councillors because you'll ask for a transfer out to Mongolia after a week, I'm sure, but asking if there's that first line with an officer to go through, I think may be really crucial again, and that communication to build up. Of course, we know the community groups, the parish councils, etc. We can tie in all with and have that healthy relationship. So, is there a plan in the short to medium term to have that in place?
Yeah, so there is. So it's a presentation I did not so long ago. So that I'd created what is quite a basic document at the minute, because for exactly those reasons, I want everybody in every area to know who their neighbourhood officers are. So that could be a police officer or a community support officer. I've delayed it slightly because of the 2 new officers that were coming, because what I didn't want to do is distribute one and then go in a week and say, oh, I've got another one, oh, and then I've got another one. So in short, yes, there will be a document which will just give you the area, the officers, and then the email address. The website will always also reflect it. So there's a part on the Notts Police website, which I think I've sent a link out to some, but it can be sent out again. And you click it, you put in your postcode, and it will bring you up the officers for your area. It's actually quite good. It's really easy to read. I'm making sure that's accurate so that when people go on there, it is absolutely accurate. But yeah, for me, it is really important that we know who the officers are in the area. So in short, yes, that will be something. And when I'm back from leave, yes, we'll do it.
That's great. I think also touch on the point that Councillor Manson mentioned about, and you've seen your social media pictures, and I was all great. I really thought Councillor Manson had been arrested, then I was going to message him, and I realised it wasn't. But I think for me, we know that officers go out on patrol all the time. Obviously, one question I get also sometimes, oh, we never see the police because if they're working from home or not around, don't see that visibility. So I think for me, when officers are going around, they're not afraid to put posts on, they say out today in downstairs probably to come and have a talk or discussion or what have you, just to show that visibility. Because I think we talk about confidence in police. I mean, I personally think that confidence in police is very high in Rushcliffe, but again, I think that obviously relations from the local neighbourhood body, we know that's gone, and hopefully come back in some relationship, but also that visibility and people out there, and that trust that people are out there around the corner, I think would be really great to see again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree. And that's I couldn't agree more. So I'm hoping that the details will be there. If you need anybody, the contacts will be there. Like has happened, if we want to do ward area walkabouts, I'm keen on that. Now, there is a slight context that there are other commitments, but I am very keen to be out in the areas of my teams being there. And sorry, I forgot to mention around that list that I'll send out. Just again, a bit of context around what that list will be. It'll be the name of the officers for the area, but that is to contact, to get advice, speak to them, maybe see what's happening in the area. What I would say it's not is to report a lot of incidents, because what I would never ever want to do is say report an incident through that route and now we're on leave. So you can imagine the harm that could come if we gave that advice. So please, when it's out, please, if it could just be an advice sort of, I need to speak to Rob or I need to speak to the sergeant. If we are reported incidents, that's through 999 for those reasons, and if not for the emergency, if not for 101, it will still get through to the police control room, and they can still put people in touch with it. I just wouldn't ever want anybody to be vulnerable and waiting in an email.
Sure. Absolutely, that's right. Thank you very much. So I think now obviously want to bring in Councillor Rob English. Rob, thank you very much for coming tonight. Down there, I know you've got another meeting to rush off to, so do really appreciate your time. Obviously, in the couple of points raised by Councillor Jones, I do if you want to just give an introduction to where you think currently are with your fully enrolled with the police responsibility, and we'll answer questions.
Right, I'll start again. Yeah, we've got a great opportunity now to build on stuff. We have Craig Berry here. Rob's come along. He's not just filled his shoes. He's going beyond that now. We've got a new crime commissioner in place who's pledging for Rushcliffe for rural crime as her manifesto. That's to come to fruition as yet, but we've got a good future where we can get things done now. I've got a great working relationship with Rob. We have monthly meetings and regular updates to what's happening. So what I'd like to see in place really is from the councillors, is because not all crimes are reported. We know that rurally. We know that trust needs building up again. And you see from the data that the rural areas, there's not much crime. There is crime, it's not being reported. So if it's not being reported, the police can't respond to that. So you're the eyes and ears. Put the message out there that any crime needs reporting, because if it's not reported to the police, it's not happened. You can see they'll put their resources to where the crime is. So we need to address that. What I would like to see in place is obviously spontaneous things, 101, 39s, as Rob's alluded to, but anything that's affecting the ward is to channel it through myself as a single point of contact. I can then raise Rob with on my monthly meetings and weekly phone calls we get. And that out to the relevant parties, especially like multi-ward members. Rob doesn't want sort of 3 members firing things at him when it's one thing, which happened quite nicely at Gamston, as Jonathan alluded to, with the problem out there. A lot of it came through, it was all channeled, and it was dealt with effectively and spontaneously. So if there's a problem on the ward that's ongoing, like it might be ASB on the field, youth gathering around the shops, please let me know, then I can collect that, liaise with Rob, and then you get that feedback. You know, we had a nice bit of feedback a couple of days ago. Well, has been arrested for the cycle thefts, so hopefully that'll stop or it'll certainly reduce. I'm looking again. We're talking about fraud and crime and door knocking. It's something we tried probably 2 years ago, where we did a nominated neighbour on a trial just here at Bridgeford, which seemed to be very effective. And we looked at bringing that back, but then obviously COVID stopped us doing that. We couldn't have people nipping around to neighbours. So that's something I want to look at to bring forward again, and perhaps across the whole borough, where if somebody comes to the door, then the person in that house, if they're vulnerable, they can push something through the letterbox and direct that person calling to a neighbour who's happy to take that inquiry. We can expand that as well. If there are any telephone calls that people are getting, they can say, well, please don't speak to me, speak to my nominated neighbour on this phone number. So there's things to do. We need to get it out there. And as Richard said, not everybody's on the internet. You know, we need to get that personal touch to everybody who's vulnerable. Any questions?
Okay, so anyone got any questions to Rob based on that, or anything on policy point of view you want to raise?
So I think just to be clear then on this point about us feeding into the 3 priorities, you want us to contact you about that, Rob?
Yes, please, because I'm going to that meeting to set priorities. So if we don't know it's happening, you're the eyes and ears of your ward. We can then assess that to what is important. And it's not a priority, it's a focus. It doesn't mean, because that's a priority in Ed Walton or Cotgrave, it doesn't mean if there's something happening in East League, that won't get responded to. It's still dynamic and spontaneous. But all those things that are building up in the background and bubbling away, let me know, and then we can introduce them to the priorities. And that's why there's 3 priorities there at the moment, because they're the ones that have been put to us.
Thanks, Councillor. I think, like I say, your work that you raised there is fantastic. In terms of, I know you do a lot of work in the city on the various crime panel, and obviously liaising with Rob and with Dave on this matter. I think the point that Councillor Walker raised is really valid about the priorities. So, from my point of view, I mean, obviously, I'm not the ward member for those areas, but if there is a focus area, is that feedback also going to the ward council about what's being done in those certain areas? So if, for example, Councillor Walker raises an issue in Goaton Ward and says this is a big issue and it's priority of the police, and you're going to the meeting, will that feedback go to the ward member as well as to wider context, just so they know what's going on? Yeah, okay. Great to clarify. Okay, there's no more questions on this item. We'll wrap that up. So thank you very much to Inspector Rob Lawton and to Councillor Inglis for attending this evening. Much appreciated. And they're busy people, so so really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you very much. Okay, so on the next item is agenda item 5. So for members of the committee, to be aware that some team around a few weeks ago now. Our last meeting, we identified there was going to be a gap on the agenda as a result of an item being removed during the corporate overview group, which was too late for us to bring an item forward for our meeting for proposals on the work programme. So I've been liaising with Daryl in terms of the item that's gone there, and what was brought back was around young and positive futures. So it's a substantial SRA that we provide in terms of that, and a big piece of work. I know a large priority of this council. So with COVID and obviously having a massive impact, especially on young people, and also in terms of the operation that's young and positive future can do, for us is really relevant to bring that back here for us to have a sort of mid-scrutiny of where we are. I mean, I think everyone remember it was actually our first item that we went as the new scrutiny group, 2 years ago now, 2 and a bit years ago. So it's good to bring that item back, and welcome Mark Clifford, who again, very busy man, so really appreciate coming down this evening to give us this update. So we're going to hand over to Derek, who's going to introduce the item.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I go into the slides, you've obviously had the paper in front of you. When we were looking at this as a scrutiny item, it was in response to how the outcomes of COVID and a lot of the challenges that we face, and really trying to get a sense and a better understanding of that. We're obviously doing a substantive paper in terms of our response to COVID and some of the learnings that we'll take from that into the future. But we thought it was right and appropriate to look at children and young people and the services that we provide. So Rushcliff Borough Council provides a wide number of services to children and young people, both as an authority in itself and in partnership. What I've tried to do in the first couple of slides of the presentation this evening is just to give an overview and a recap of some of the services that the community department gets involved with, which I've included as a part of the appendices to the main report, and then really to pass over to Mark, who provides our largest SLA for children and young people, and then really have that granular focus in and really get his thoughts on what it's like on the ground. Because since we renewed the SLA in January, it's only been 9-10 months, but it feels like an incredibly long period of time, and we want to ensure that we're fleet of foot and responding to any emerging trends, so that our money is invested providing the best outcomes for children and young people across the borough. So I'll attempt to share the presentation. One second. Zoom. Sorry. Great, thank you. So just to recap, sorry. Does that work? Yeah.
Okay, so while we'll just get the president online, I was going to go through about the recommendations. We're going to bring that after the presentation. Might as well do that at the moment. So obviously, after the presentation, we're going to be asked to vote on 3 recommendations. So number A is to consider and make comments on the presentation made by Tunbridge Community Trust, endorse the work of the Positive Future and Young projects, and C, consider further areas for exploration on how we provide services to children and young people in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. So with that in mind, for the presentation, ready to go?
Thank you. So the first area of focus is something that's emerged as a part of our response to the COVID pandemic, is the holiday activity and food programme. And you'll be aware of the Marcus Rashford campaign and providing nutritious meals to young people when they're out of mainstream school in the holiday periods. So we have worked closely with our county colleagues to provide food and sessions, and we've delivered over the summer period, over 4 weeks, 513 sessions for young people between ages of 5 and 16 to have a free healthy lunch over that period. And that was from a very standing start, and it it's a part of a wider programme with our upper tier local authority in Nottinghamshire County Council, who deliver we deliver a wide range of community events and programmes. Typically, we have over 30,000 people a year, but by far our largest is Lark in the Park, which is on National Children's Play Day on the first weekend in August, and that provides a wide range of activities for children and young people, which is delivered by Nicola, who sat on the session this evening. One of the recent developments within the communities team is we've gone into partnership with Knott's Outdoor Education, which is an arm's length organisation of Nottinghamshire County Council, who deliver educational opportunities for schools, groups and young people across the area. But we have some delivery taking place now at Rushcliff Country Park, so they will book and use the facility and use that as a base to deliver their programme. They were predominantly based in the north of the county, but that's a partnership we developed over the COVID pandemic, and we're now starting to see as schools return using that as a base to deliver those outdoor and forest school sessions. As a part of the Borough Council responsibility for West Bridgeford, we deliver a number of children's playgrounds and activities across the area. We also have a provision in Rushcliff Country Park. In the coming weeks, we will start to see the redevelopment of Boundary Road, cycle track, and in the winter, springtime, we will be delivering new playground developments on Abbey Park and Alfred Road. Another area that we do is we through our sports development work, we deliver a lot of sports and junior activity in terms of subsidised activity for children and young people. You will see that we're doing a major redevelopment of the Gresham Sports Park, which will have a huge impact. We were having discussions this evening about the 96 youth-related teams that will be using that facility in the coming weeks when that comes online. We deliver a number of sports and health interventions across the borough, targeting children and young people from leading more healthy lifestyles and taking part in healthy activities, both in their well-being and their physical activity. As we had at the last scrutiny, I'm responsible for the safeguarding children and to ensure that we've got robust procedures in place to protect children and to ensure that concerns that are raised are dealt with appropriately. We have a number of service level agreements across the borough, not just with Trentbridge Community Trust, but Nottingham Rugby, the Nottingham Festival of Science and Curiosity, who deliver educational opportunities for children and young people across the borough, particularly around STEM and trying to encourage young people into sciences as a part of the wider national challenge in terms of getting more people into those type of activities. We have some live and local, where it's performances and giving opportunities for children and young people and the wider community to experience live theatre in their local area. And Mark will touch on the positive futures, which is our main focus delivery for children and young people across the borough. Just some of the emerging projects that we look to work on in the coming months is there will be an extension of the holiday activity and food programme, which is looking at what delivery will take place for those children in need of food provision over the Christmas and Easter holidays. So we're working on what that looks like. And in addition to that, as a part of the Conservative government's manifesto in 2019 was to deliver a place-based service called Family Hubs, which they will look to deliver services to 0 to 19-year-olds in a setting. So having an actual physical base that will be the whole spectrum of children's services. So everything from early help to Sure Start services to children and young peoples, and using that as a hub to bring all of those agencies together that provide services to children and young people between 0 and 19. The programme at the moment is looking at 2 areas across the whole of Nottinghamshire. So at the moment, we're working closely with our colleagues in Nottinghamshire County Council to see what that would look like, and if one of those bases would be in Rushcliff. So we continue to work with them in terms of those children's services. But really the substantive focus today is to understand the impact that COVID's had in terms of some of our discretionary services, and really to find out what that is on the ground. So I'm going to pass over to Mark to go through the substantive trust SLA since we renewed that in January.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. So it's been 2 years and it's gone really fast, unbelievably. If you can just slip to the first slide. Just a very quick fly-by-night in terms of where we started and where we are now. There's a couple of slides there. So it's my favourite image on the right-hand side. It's kind of where it all began for me. It was April 2009. I was given a laptop and a phone and thrown into Cotgrave. Now, it wasn't as bad as it seemed. There was a partnership approach to that. Yeah, it was. It actually was. There was a partnership approach, and there was a lot of thought went into why we was there. And it was an amazing 3 years to start the project off. So that's where we were, 2009. It's 12 years ago. Then the Young project came along. It was a Borough Council delivered project. They asked us to kind of get hold of it and kind of shake it about a little bit and make sure it does what it says on the tin, which I thought we was getting to a really nice place with it. Pandemic came along and ruined those plans, but we've got really nice plans for it again moving forward, and we'll pick up and to talk a little bit more about that later on. In terms of the delivery from the Trembridge Community Trust side, and I've put there's a pound for pound delivery model, and the reason we say that is because every penny that comes in from the Borough Council is actually spent on the project. The community trust and the club pick up the running costs of the actual trust. So, you know, from year one to today, you know, the club have been responsible for significant investment into this project as well. So I think it's important that, you know, every penny that you get, that you invest, it goes back into your communities and your young people. Next slide, please. Just a quick introduction to my team. There's a few missed in there, but we had some cricket training because we're trying to have a little bit more of a cricket presence where we can. It's not forced upon people, but if people want to, we are now kind of trained to be able to deliver that. We have a board of trustees that we have to report into. So whilst we have an SLA, that we also have to report on our SLA to our trustees as well as to our general committee at the cricket club, which is on a monthly basis. So we are scrutinised on many different levels. My direct line manager is Tim Eglinton, who is the deputy chief executive, and great for us as a trust is also the financial man at Trent Bridge. So it does have its benefits. And as you can see on the left-hand side, your left-hand side is our project officer for Young. On the right-hand side is the Positive Futures team, which again is a small team considering the amount of work that we deliver. So I just want to talk a little bit about again where we were. It started in Cotgrave, and as you can see, the areas increased year on year, and each period is a block of funding that we were awarded, and to where we are today. And today it's to cover all of Rushcliff, mainly to cover the secondary schools, and we are in all secondary schools, excluding Beckett, who have not taken up the invite as yet, but I'm sure at some point along they will. So all schools are now engaged, and we're working actively in all schools as we speak. So our transition, we've always had to evolve. When we started, it was very much myself and a couple of part-time youth workers on the streets in Cotgrave, trying to figure out what was going on, trying to figure out how we could help these young people, putting together a partnership approach. There was an ABI in place at the time, an area-based initiative, which the Borough Council led on, which we were part of, and we all worked together really to kind of find and forge the best way forward for young people. That changed significantly after the 3-year period, because Cotgrave didn't have the antisocial behaviour that we would kind of been put in there to kind of help and cure. So we had to start to think, where these young people been? How did they end up in a situation where they were committing antisocial behaviour, being picked up by the police? So we looked at all of their journeys, and it all starts from school. It all stemmed from school, and the process of being excluded and then permanently excluded from school. That then linked to them being on the streets more often, and social behaviour would occur from that point. So we then started to look at being involved in the school process to make sure that we can get them very early and stop the exclusion. That was the key. If we can stop the exclusions, especially the permanent exclusions, we knew that we was onto a winner. And it's been proven year on year that that was actually a good move for us to make. School behaviour policies are changing all the time, and mainly because of the academy system. You know, schools are now being run from different areas, sometimes different counties, and their behaviour policies don't always reflect the areas that they're in. And it's kind of more stick than carrot. You know, there's a lot of stick involved in some of our schools. Our young people do not get an opportunity to change their behaviour. Sometimes it's 2, 3, 4 opportunities and they're permanently excluded. So that doesn't help us as an organisation. And then we have to go and work with them in the PRUs, which are the pupil referral units. So it doesn't mean that they're now removed from the community and they're removed from the life and they're not a problem anymore. They absolutely are still a problem, and they need the support in the community even more. They're most at risk of committing crime and social behaviour, and these young people, they must be our priority, and they are our priority as well as the other guys in the school. The challenges that these young people face is they're more often than not got more of a wraparound service around them. So there's a lot more intensity, multi-agency meets these guys. So it's a little bit more labour intensive for us, and hence sometimes the SLA, the figures, it might be one person who's in a PRU might actually be 3 people in a school normally. So that's the amount of time that it takes up, if that makes sense. So our key priorities, and you know, before we go through the slide, is to improve the quality of life for our young people and our families, and the very basics of that is developing opportunities and raising aspirations. That no matter what we do, that's what we try to achieve for all of the young people that come through our programme. So the service level agreement determines what we deliver, and in fairness to this, it was a long time coming. We started the conversations very early in 2020, and we was in the middle of a pandemic. So we were able to understand what we felt the SLA needed to look like. And there are elements of the SLA that we've got a COVID recovery plan in there, which has got no targets attached to it. That's just because we don't know what's coming, but when it does come, we may need to flex the service level agreement and work with officers to make sure that is able to, we were able to react to that and then offer the service across the borough that is needed. We want to deliver a service that improves quality of life. That's what we've always done. Our children, our young people, and our families and our communities will all vouch for that. And I've got a fantastic team when it comes to that. The spine of my team have been there for 9+ years, and you know, we have had some movement more recently, but we've got a really committed and passionate team that are able, and we've got some fantastic links in the community. We've just put an office back into the community in the last year because we'd come out of Cotgrave where we were based initially, but we've actually just put an office back. We've gone back into Cotgrave now. We've got an office at Trent Bridge, but our offices are now based in the middle of Cotgrave and can get out into other areas of the community, which we're trying to create hubs, our community hubs, so that we're around more often. And it's great because people can access us. So whether we're in schools, whether we're in the community hubs, people can access us more easily. Trent Bridge is a little bit further out than some of our communities. So some of the challenges, and there were some, especially in the early stages, you know, there were 3 lockdowns. The full team in March were all furloughed, and that was a business-wide decision. It wasn't one that we welcomed, if we're honest, because unfortunately our young people weren't able to be furloughed. They were young people, and they were going to continue to be young people, and they still had their problems, and some of those problems were magnified significantly by being locked down in the house. And the parents, you know, were often putting their hair out, and you know, whilst we were furloughed, our phones never stopped, and our staff continued to communicate with young people throughout, to the point where we were the first guys back at Trentbridge actually to start working, albeit there was not a full staff team, but there was 4 or 5 of us came back early in May and started that work. We had pop-up sessions, and obviously we're still in lockdown, but we did remote sessions where we could. Some of the schools, whilst we're reopening, they allowed us to go in and work because they had lots of space, because the classrooms were empty because everyone was at home, most of the people at home. But the workers of the key workers and the most vulnerable were in school. They were our young people, so we were able to go and support them in the schools. And for those that weren't in schools, walks in the park, whatever we could do, which kept a young person and member of staff safe. And then the full team came back in July, and we had a reasonably fantastic summer, in all fairness. It kind of happened, there was lots going on, not as much as what we've just done, but it felt great just to be out and to be engaging with our young people. The second lockdown came along. We continued pretty much in the same vein, really. Yes, we limited our travel where we could. One of the things we found in the first round was we felt young people were going to be really easy to communicate with online. And it just wasn't the case. It was absolutely the opposite for the vast majority. The young project worked fantastically well, but if we put the young cohort and the positive futures cohort into 2 pots, they're very different people. And so the young cohorts could continue online, and they worked really well. Some of our young people on the positive futures side just didn't. We tried to create workshops that were online. Any of the one-to-one workshops that we tried to do, they had young people in the background, the parents were in the back listening. It just wasn't suitable. So we quickly learned a lesson ourselves, which I'm sure everyone I speak to are surprised by this. But it's something that we've looked now to try and address. I think the world's gone this way now, so it's a learning curve for them as well. It's about them being a bit more confident in their own skin and understanding, what they can do. So turn your cameras off if you feel not as confident. But that brings its challenges when you're trying to mentor someone, because it's a human-to-human approach, mentoring. And if you haven't got that and you can't see them, then it's a challenge to understand where they're at. If you can't see them at all, never mind being in the same room. So the second lockdown was a significant challenge for us. What we did in January 2021, we went back through all of our lists from years, and we contacted key people that we felt probably would need some support. There were 25 people that we contacted. There's about 15 young people that have had some support. 3 significant that when we made contact were in very dark places. The bottom right picture there is one of our cohort from, I think she's 23 now, but it was she's got anxiety, depression. She's been excluded from her family, so she was absolutely on her own. She was worried about her weight. We put one-to-one sessions in, worked with the gym. They let her in to do one-to-one sessions. She started feeling a little bit better about herself. She's now attending the Ready for Work, and may at some point in the very near future try to get into some kind of employment. So that's the story, and we've only just got to that point now. This was early January, so it's been a long process, but we feel that she might be in that position soon. Lockdown 3 came. Obviously, we spoke about January and what we did in terms of engaging the old cohort, but we pretty much continued in the same vein because we knew that we couldn't shut down. We'd lost too much contact with young people in the first 6 weeks, some of the key young people. So we continued as much as we could in a safe vein. Online where we could, being responsible, of course, but unfortunately our young people haven't got the ability to kind of furlough themselves and part of the behaviour. I wish they could. It would be so much easier. So we've developed some partnerships. The most exciting one for me is the one with the University of Nottingham. So Dr. Alan Pringle is the professor at the Institute of Mental Health. He's now supporting us in many ways. So the most important one for me is the clinical supervision of our staff. So whilst we have supervision and performance reviews, actually we realise that they needed clinical supervision. Some of the work that they're picking up day in, day out is hard wearing on them, and so he's now providing that support. We're putting together all of our work is going to be evaluated by the university. So we've got a team of students now assisting us with every piece of work, every workshop book that we've got, and making sure it's meeting the needs of what it needs to do, but also capturing the evidence at the end, which is really important. Working on live projects. So what I mean by that is we've got a number of really complex cases that we work with, and quite often you've got a multi-agency approach. There will be 7 or 8 professionals around the table, and we're the only ones that can actually engage with the young person and work with them. And we're probably the least trained to do so. So we're having to work with Dr. Alan Pringle to say, look, what would you suggest here? What do we need to be doing? Who do we need to be pulling in to support with this? So, and he's been an absolute diamond. He's given us his time. The University of Nottingham have kind of given him as part of their CSR. So it's not something we're having to pay for, and it's been an absolute blessing for us, an absolute key time as well. The picture on the right there, you probably can't tell, but I got an image from them. They didn't even know I weren't in the room, but I took a picture and they all had their eyes closed. And I thought, what's going on here? They were doing some mindfulness and meditation training to be able to give that to young people and offer that to young people as a way of trying to relieve stress and tension and control anxieties and different behaviours. So really pleased with that, and hopefully that is something that will continue to develop. The business engagement, we've just run our first network event in a very long time in partnership with the Rushcliff Business Partnership, and we're hoping to run several more of these throughout the year, hoping to target sectors, hoping to target different people. Again, COVID's kind of over, but it's not. We're still there. But what we're trying to achieve is trying to get young people and people just back to thinking about that pathway back into employment. So we've got some highlights, and we've tried to do this in images. So the greatest thing about what we can do is we can rock up with a football anywhere, pretty much anywhere, and engage with people. And that's what we've encouraged the staff to do, especially around is not really being able to go indoors. It's not being safe enough to go indoors at times. Is let's get out in the communities with a ball and kick a ball around where people are, and let's engage with people and let's start those conversations. We've managed to have a residential. We've had 2 different residentials this year. Positive Futures have done a residential, and the young team have done a residential, but I'll touch on that a little later. And then we've been on trips, reward trips for those that have engaged in workshops and that throughout the year to Drayton Manor, which is the one in the middle. We have our VIPPE, which is another thing on the SLA, which was football. And we were very lucky to get Kelvin Wilson, who famously marked Messi out of a game once a few years ago. And he came and spent a couple of hours with the kids and did a Q&A with them, and pretty much had a kick about with them, and it was great. They all kind of was like, wow, he's got a picture with Messi. They didn't know who he was, but they knew who Messi was. So that's great. And again, we delivered our Rushcliff Citizenship service, which is our kind of model of the National Citizen Service, and that consists of workshops, which consists of confidence, resilience, project planning. We did a social action plan on antisocial behaviour, which I will touch on later. But we looked at working with businesses and unpicking perceptions around antisocial behaviour. Young people hanging around on corners, wearing hoodies, smoking, and how they were perceived. And we did a little bit of work on that with. It was born from a meeting I did in Cotgrave, actually, with the police. It was the beat manager at the time. The new beat manager who's gone and come back. I forget his name. Chris Jury, that's this fella. And the issues that they were having were scooters, which has been mentioned this evening, people climbing on roofs, and just groups of young people just being around. And whilst we're not here to tell young people, certainly we won't, to not ride the scooters around, there are legalities around it. So how can we work with the police to make sure they're getting the right message and that they understand? Again, young people climbing on roofs, what are the dangers? Again, we're not going to say don't climb on the roof because they're probably more likely to. What are the dangers? What happens if you slip? What happens if you're on your own and you slip? It's even more dangerous. So we're not encouraging climb with your mates, but let's look and understand what are the consequences of you being on a roof or flying through the precinct on a scooter. And then the other thing was around groups of people. So the perceptions that, and some of the things from the young people were just hanging around. Some of the things from the community were, they look menacing. It's hard to walk through. It's unnerving. So it's getting the young people to understand that. And they created a short video, which I've seen this week, which is just finished. It's not quite there, and it's got a bit of work to do. But hopefully we'll release that in the next few weeks. And it's all based around, there's some business owners there, there's some young people, there's some people in the community. So it's got a few views of a few different people. And for me, that's a massive highlight of trying to get people to understand. Because going back to 2009, actually, a lot of the young people weren't committing antisocial behaviour. They were just hanging around. There were 2 or 3 in the group were committing antisocial behaviour, and that was the problem. So it's understanding what is and what isn't. And I totally resonate with what's being reported in terms of antisocial behaviour, because I sat in that meeting and we were told antisocial behaviour in Cotgrave was rife. However, the police had no reports of it. So there were challenges. And that doesn't mean it's not happening. It's just obviously not being reported. We had a celebration event at the end of the RCS, and that was just to get our young people together to celebrate, all of the stuff that they'd done, the residential, the workshops, the social action plan. And they came in with their parents, and it was really good to hear their kind of thoughts on what they'd done. Some young people that had not been out for a long while had suffered with anxiety, and the parents, coming up to staff, just thanking them, saying, he seems to have got back to himself, or she seems to be back to herself on the back of this. So that was really good for us to hear. The middle picture at the bottom is our healthy hearts, again delivered outside in a safe as possible way. And whilst they were doing that side of things, there were some young people that didn't want to go out and exercise, so they was on a healthy cooking workshop, and that's the one on the left hand side. But some of the highlights of Young, we spoke about the networking event. We've had our first market, which was in Ruddington the weekend just gone. And we know that we've got plans once a month now to be there, and there's a Christmas market happening, and there's one in Rushcliff, we hope, going on soon. We want to get back to markets, is what it's all about. The young ambassadors went to Wilmot Dixon, to the Board Marsh site, and spent half a day there looking at the project, the demolition, the thoughts of what it's going to be in the future. And they spent half a day there and got some real good insight into the industry. So that was a real good eye opener for them, and there's lots of social media presence on the back of that. We've recruited our new ambassadors, and they're on the bottom left. There's one missing. It normally tends to be. Unfortunately, we never seem to get 7 in a room at once. That elusive number, but the new guys and the recruiting, and again a real kind of mixed bag of young talent, which we're really looking forward to working with this year. Hopefully more face-to-face sessions than what we was able to do last year. So we did a survey back in July, and it was a small survey. It was a number of people across all of our mentoring cohorts, and they would just ask these simple questions. And the answers, a few of them, is what you'd expect. So the first one on the top left is, how has COVID affected your life? So mental health's gone downhill, not being able to see your family, affected their ADHD. That's their spelling, not ours. That's how they spelled it. It's gone down. It's gone down as they wrote it. What are your hopes and aspirations for the future? Again, quite happy with some of those. And there wasn't many that wasn't positive. The odd young person will put something as a joke down, but in the main, people have aspirations. And they've got a good idea of what they want to do. The thing that concerned me the most was the bottom one. There's not a lot for young people to do. Violent, they esteem their community as violent. Some people, some not. Some people friend, some not. And they were racist after football. We've unpicked that and we understand what that situation was. And then just full of drugs, which again we've had a large discussion about this in the team, and we just feel that person's in a pocket of people that probably is his perception. And we need to work to kind of pull him from that group and put him into a more positive group. So it's great that we get things like that, because it allows us to understand if that's his perception is in the wrong place. So that was just a snapshot. And we one of the things I've tasked the team doing, and again with the university, is to do more of these. Let's understand where people are at and do the same people in a few months' time. So in the short term, we've got a number of things that we'd like to kind of get off the ground. So the National Citizenship Service, and we've talked about our spin-off is the RCS. We've got a pilot in October that they've sanctioned for us. So we're hoping to run a program for the National Citizenship Service. That will be a great opportunity for us to engage more young people from the positive futures element of the communities into those kind of opportunities. It tends to be I would say the more affluent, the more driven young people that access the NCS. So we want to try and open this up to the young people that probably wouldn't naturally gravitate towards this. Are ready for work. We're not sure, you know, with furlough just ending and the benefits returning to the previous levels, we're not entirely sure what that look like, what's that going to look like, and what the fallout is going to be. We're going to be there every week. The footfall at the moment is really, really slow. We've had hundreds of jobs, and I literally mean hundreds. We had hundreds at Trembridge to fill, and we just weren't getting people in across the hospitality sector. Not just as we know this is a national wide trend. So it's been quiet. It's not always been quiet, and I'm expecting it to kind of pick up a little bit now that furlough has kind of come to an end. So all being well, we'll start to get the footfall through the clubs again. Our just on that, we had initial talks on creating a youth employment hub, and whilst they are currently they're doing what they are, which is a job club, we want to have a more youth focused approach to try and get more young people in and target them and have the roles that they want to go into as well. So making it a bit more young people friendly. It might look scary actually walking in there, but that's just a stage picture. So I wouldn't like to walk into that room either. And then networking events for us is another big one. And again, I've spoken about it previously. It's making it more sector based, and it's targeting young people that they have an interest in that particular sector and getting the businesses there. Let's introduce them to businesses. Let's have them in the same room having conversations, a little bit like a networking event, really informal, but an opportunity to expose young people to business. And then a focused on for us is on recruiting more businesses into our partnership, but with a view on them offering us roles and coming to us when they want roles filling, and with a view on developing young people's pathways. So just last slide. We are aware of some of the changes that have happened in terms of COVID, and we're not sure what some of the challenges will be moving forward. We know what some of them are at the moment. Some of the young people have taken it really badly. Our partnership with the youth service is resurrected again. They said they've not seen the amount of aggression for a long time in some of the young people that they're seeing now. So that's something that we do know is happening. We know there's a lot of people still anxious about coming out of the house or being in large groups of people. So, you know, that's worrying. One thing I will say is we've always been prepared for things that come, and I know the team are kind of sat on the edge of the seats waiting and seeing signs and waiting for the evidence and national trends to be able to kind of react to that. And we'll work again with Derek and Nick to make sure that the SLA flexes to that, because it will need to. If it happens, and again we don't, but we're in a position where we are able to flex it if we need to, and we can adapt and make sure we address the needs of the people in the communities as and when that happens. So we've got some, we've developed some Kickstart posts. What's that done for us? A number of things really. The first thing for us was providing opportunities for young people. They've been out of work for a long time, so we've provided opportunities for young people. They've been with us since April. So unique opportunities in youth work, in media, and in and around working with the young teams or working with businesses. But what it's allowed us to do is actually spread our project even further than we've ever been able to spread it before, because we've got an extra 3 bodies that are able to go and be an extension of what we do. And we're hoping again to get another 3 because it's just been extended. And whilst we're very clear, you know, our budget doesn't allow us to employ these people, unfortunately. We've been very clear with them at the beginning, and all the way through, we're gathering all of the evidence and all the information onto their CVs to try and help and support them into employment at the end. So, you know, we've been very clear, and you know, it will be a big loss when we lose them, unfortunately, because they you know, they've become part of the team. But that's the nature of the beast, unfortunately. And the final thing is just continually developing innovative ways of developing an online audience for both projects. Now, we've already identified some young people don't want to be online, but for those that do, and those that can, or those that will access an online platform, we want to make sure that's an option for them.
That's brilliant. I mean, thank you all. Excellent presentations. Great to see the amount of work you've done. I mean, I think I can imagine how hard it was, especially the team going on furlough and wanting to be there to support the young people and probably their obligation to not be able to. So that's a fantastic job the team given is fantastic. A question at the moment. There's one burning one I'm going to use the privilege of being chairman to ask one first and I'll come back at the end, which surrounds apprenticeships. So talk about getting people into work. I mean, one big passion of mine is apprenticeships, the portfolio I have in the other council. And I know that's obviously a lot, most businesses now have to pay into apprenticeship levy. So it's something that really targeted doing the county council itself, over £1 million goes into a levy to obviously employ apprentices through there, including transfer to local business. Is there any conversation you've had with those businesses about what businesses in the local area to try and encourage some of the people down that route? Because I think that's business who, if they don't use that money, they're going to lose it back to government anyway. So if they've got any business sense, they're going to spend themselves on their team up in the back. Is just wondering what the reception is like at business on that.
We're part of the employment hub here at Rushcliff Council, which Catherine and Caroline head up. And there's talks constantly about how can we get that information out to businesses, because we know if they've got the information, more likely to take someone on, which has an opportunity for us to then signpost into that. So that work is been ongoing. It's never not been, even before the pandemic. It's been an active piece of work that is being done by a number of different partners.
Very interesting to know, like Risk Business Partnership and other partners too. Like I said, I just think there's a lot of opportunities going to be out there. If this has got any sense, they're going to be utilised at levy, because like I say, they can rise up a lot of cost themselves, but also bringing time to people to train up their own way. And if the business I'm involved in, it's a very odd business, and anyone with, you've got to teach them for, and they don't know if a business, because they won't be able to go otherwise. The any right business sense. So I think I'm sure there'll be something out there. So that'd be great to see. Okay, open up the floor. Any? I'll see you then.
Thank you, Chairman. Just endorsing what Jonathan has said, really. But I sit on the town council in Cotgrave, as you know, Mark, and going back 9-10 years when the problems were rife, an awful lot of excellent work was done on your behalf with the team. It did begin to spike, as you know, over Christmas of this year and into the early spring. And I think that's when we started talking to users to say, well, we have a problem kicking off here again. Can you come back? And once you had an office space more centrally, as you've just explained to us, we had you on the ground, so to speak. You were captive, so that suited us fine. And I know you did some wonderful work. And summer, when we were all limited by COVID and what we could and couldn't do, you saw something like, or you had over almost 400 attendees, I believe, over the summer periods, and put numerous sessions together in terms of physical and mental health, well-being, educational workshops, outreach sessions, etc., etc., etc. So, despite, to say, the limitations and restrictions, you kept a lot of kids very busy, which was great. And on behalf of the town council, I would like to thank you for that and look forward to your continued involvement and help.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I'll pass that back to the team
Thank
as well.
you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. To Councillor Jones.
Yeah, and thanks for your description and your obvious enthusiasm and continuing commitment. It does strike me that the level of depression that might be around families in general in some of the poorer areas of the borough will lead to some of the youngsters who are already renowned as mental health issues of a stronger order. And that will be exacerbated as people at the poorer ends of the margins feel the onset of the higher fuel costs, the cut in the benefit, and the tax if they're in people in low work. But it just leads me to wonder, how many people are you actually working with who are really on the margins and on the brink of exclusion and crime? And how do we get a measure of that? That's one question. And the other question I have is to the officer who mentioned these county place family hubs. I don't know whether this is a dream or a reality. I know that parents who've had mothers who've had a baby cannot even ring their own health visitor. They have to ring a hub to justify why they need a health visitor to visit. So I'd like a bit more information about that, and whether it's just yet another, like the county hub, where you have to ring to get a service and then be put on to somebody else, etc., etc. But the question remains for yourself about numbers and how you see that developing, given the pressures on young people.
I think in regards to numbers, we've just submitted the latest data set to Derek and his team. I think that currently we're working with around 26, I think, and you'd have to forgive me if that's wrong, it's not accurate, it's around that number. And I would say every single one of those are at high risk at this moment in time there's certainly of exclusion. I wouldn't say they're all behavioural. There's a lot of emotional and well-being work being carried out with the group. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a lot of this is being carried from the home into school as well. So, you know, there's only so much we can do, and we can. Some of it feels like we're sticking a sticky plaster on things, if I'm honest. But where we're able to refer to other agencies, that's exactly what we do, and we try and support the young person to manage their emotions and try and get them through on it, or sometimes on a day-to-day basis. We don't always see a young person just once a week. Depending on the level, they might get seen twice, maybe 3 times, depending on the need at the time.
Thank you for that.
Okay, and Derek on the second one.
Sorry, yeah, just to add on to Mark's point, and we've really tried to flex we have very specific key performance indicators, but it's that level of intervention and support. And I think touched on his presentation is that one of the outcomes of COVID has been the significant effect on people's mental health and actually getting that education. And I think that's his team has been really focusing on that main cohort to make sure that they're okay. Just if you touch on the family hubs, it is very much at the pilot stage. The county council colleagues are doing a lot of work, speaking to a lot of partners about infrastructure mapping of what might be out there. One of the key challenges is that there's no new money identified for government to fund these programs at the moment. So that is a challenge in terms of what that looks like. But it is something that we're working with in terms of because it's statute to deliver these as a part of their program. So it is an emerging picture, but there's no clear end point in terms of what those hubs will look like. So it is to deliver physical spaces, and they are looking at what infrastructures across the borough at the moment, but there's no new money to deliver those spaces within the area.
Are you saying that's a statutory requirement to provide this service for children of all ages and their families? There's no money for it.
It's a government commitment to deliver family hubs as a part of their it's the Best Start program, whether it's statutory or not, but it's something that they've committed to, that the county council have to provide a response to government in terms of what they're looking to deliver in each of the 7 districts across Nottinghamshire.
Well, with all due respect to the dream, if that results in the removal of midwives, health visitors and others that you listed there from actual basic services that we normally provide, then that's a really backward step.
I think it was probably worth on this point. I know it's an area which is under county council as the borough council. That point, if we were to contact the county council to ask for response for Councillor Jones, and if we don't get that, I'll myself and sure I suppose I'm happy to take that conversation up to make sure we get that full response. I know Derek won't have those answers to that point. I believe as well it's not a statutory requirement yet. I think it's supposed to be going on the new bills. There's going to note say it was in the manifest and equipment. I don't think it's gone into bill stage yet, but we'll just get clarification. Not 100% sure, but as I say, there goes county council for you, Councillor Jones, and gets that answer on the hubs just to make sure we get you the correct information as I can.
when I did speak to the colleague that is leading this piece of work at the county council, we did discuss that it would be good to produce a briefing paper for members both at both tiers of local government and Nottinghamshire, so they have a clear roadmap of what that work is. So that is something that she's working on, and I'll ensure that's shared with colleagues so that you've got.
Yeah, in fact, the key issue is if it pulls resources from what they're already doing, which they're stretched in doing, then it's a pipe dream. It's sort of disappearing up into the cloud.
Yeah, well, if we get that brief information, and of course, then absolutely from there we can look at that information. If you don't feel it's quite when it's environmental level, we're obviously more happy to take that up going forward. So thank you very much. Councillor Jones, Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much for coming and the presentation. And it was really interesting to hear about the challenges that you faced during the pandemic. But I'd like to say thank you very much to you and your team for helping all the young residents of the borough through that period and trying to communicate with them with which, as you showed, which way or anyway how. I just wanted to ask about the events and the Healthy Hearts, that type of thing, and the markets and all that spectrum of events that you do. And I don't know if officers here might be able to help answer the question. Are they just very one-offs centered locationally events that happen? Is the scope of going around the borough, the roadshow type thing, to try and just get out to all the areas? Because sometimes, like you say, with the challenges of the hub and being at Trent Bridge, that trying to get out to where the people are in the community, and where sometimes residents think that some kind of events happen are a bit like West Bridgeford centric. Is there the scope of going out into the wider area of the borough, like Bing, Copgrave, Eastleigh, that type of areas as well?
First of all, thank you for your best wishes. Pre-pandemic, we were at, I think, 11 or 12 different community fairs in terms of markets. So we were growing in terms of our presence around. So that was great for us. And unfortunately, that stopped. We started with Ruddington, and we're hoping that the main markets for Christmas and for the summer come back to West Bridgeford, because they're our main events. But we will definitely be looking to get into any community fair that happens, any community festival. We will have a presence there. I know we've got some stalls at Cotgrave. Christmas lights turn on this year, and we're asking all the different parishes, what are you doing? What can we support you with? So, you know, we want to get back to where we was. So that answers the first bit about the markets. The Healthy Hearts we delivered in 2019, 2020. We delivered to 12, I think, Rushcliff schools. So that's been offered again. The email has just gone out for this academic year, as well as inviting them all to come and use the classroom at Trent Bridge as well. So there is an offer, and the Healthy Arts is a bit more. We can get out there with that. You've seen we can deliver in lots of different environments, but that is predominantly a year 5 and 6 classroom based session. We've just took it outdoors just for obvious reasons at the moment.
And just from an officer's perspective, one of the key challenges we've had in terms of physical delivery is working within the guidelines set down by government. Nicola, who leads our events program and the development of that work, it's contingency plan and contingency plan and contingency plan for what way COVID is happening during that period, and then having that discussion with Mark about what is practical to deliver and what we can do. So we're very hopeful to see that return, as Mark said, but we do have an element of caution because we don't know what restrictions, as we plan for our next major event, which will be the Christmas light switch on, what that will actually look like in reality. So we've got a couple of different plans for eventualities in terms of how the COVID pandemic develops over the period. So we will be probably close to the time being in a clear position to say what that will look like.
Thank you very much, Councillor Manda.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you. It was a really good presentation. Lots of really, really positive stuff. It was, think Councillor Williams just stole a bit of my thunder. My question is going to be, where do you want to go next, and how can we best help you? But I will throw that question out there. The other thing I thought was really interesting was about the work that you're doing with Positive Futures, and how the reactions were different with people online as well. There's a colleague of mine who's in her early 20s, and she's got younger siblings, and they live in quite a rural part of the borough. And yeah, sort of having 5 people online at the same time in a rural area with not the fastest broadband just wasn't possible. So she ended up having to come into the office all the way through the pandemic because there was no way she could work from home. And I think I get the impression the siblings were in the same room. So I totally get kind of problems that there would have been with engaging people online. I was a little bit concerned with the thing about how the academies have this thing of like only giving the kids a few sort of chances to improve themselves, and then they're effectively kicked out. I think that's quite appalling. Maybe I'm not using the right terminology there, but that was kind of the impression I got, and I think that's a real problem, and that's something that's got to be a concern for all of us. I know we're not the education authority, but it is something that I think we need to sort of push back on, because I don't think that's the right way to behave at all. I don't think it's right that we're sort of, they say, oh well, you know, you've been naughty 4 times now. That's going to look bad on our performance indicators and have us sliding down the school tables. Let's push these kids out somewhere else. I think that, because if that's what's happening, I think that's absolutely appalling. But with that caveat, I think it sounds like what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. And yeah, where would you like to go next?
What's the budget?
I'll look down the back of the sofa.
No, and again, I think with everything, it comes down to resource. We're 92% people. You know, we've got a very small budget for delivery, because ultimately it's the people that engage with the people. So, you know, we try and be creative, like the Kickstarts, try and expand our workforce, even if it is for a small time, just to try and get that reach a little bit further. And it's always about, you know, staffing. If we could get more bodies, we could do more work. So unfortunately, it kind of starts there and ends there with that kind of budgetary issue that we've got.
Okay, thank you. So keep looking now back at that sofa, Councillor Mander. We need some more money. Okay, so I'll look at that one. Thank you. Councillor Jones.
I just meant to say earlier on, I was really pleased to hear that you said that the potential customer base, as it were, was all secondary schools. I'm conscious that some of the schools are getting huge, and Rushcliff is proposing, because of the pressures on secondary school, to go from a 10 form entry to a 12 form entry. And some kids, especially with low esteem and mental health issues, are going to feel lost in that scale of operation. And I know they've got a sort of exclusion unit within the grounds, but I just foresee that being as quite a huge problem as some of these schools get under pressure to take more and more pupils. But thanks I'm pleased that you've taken it across the board.
If I could just answer, just in regards to the transition from year 6 into secondary school, we're totally aware that the schools are growing and they're getting bigger, and it's more daunting for more young people. We offer a transition program, working with the primary schools and the secondary schools to support that movement from one establishment to another, and that transition really consists of our member of our staff being a constant. So the primary schools do some fantastic work around transition and handing over and giving them all the information. But actually what they don't do is send someone with them, which is what we do. So any young person that's referred into the transition program, they will have one of our members of staff with them for at least the first half term. That will see them every week to make sure that they're okay. Are they settling in? We've got the contact. We've worked with them all the way through the summer, so that we know exactly where they are and the relationships are built. So that is something we've done for quite a few years.
Councillor Walker.
Thanks, Chair. Mark, can you remind me what the I think you'd say pathway for young people is into Positive Futures? Does it have to come from a referral from the school?
No, it can come from anywhere. Parents, self-referral, police. It can come from anywhere in the community. It mainly comes from school, because they're kind of almost a sitting audience, and that's the way that we kind of we've gone in terms of that prevention, but we're getting referrals now from parents, we're getting referrals from social care. So we'll take them from wherever they come from. If they meet the criteria and we can support them and they live in Rushcliff, we'll accept.
I think that was a great point, Councillor Grace. For example, on the previous item around policing, and social media at Walton, around Hilton Crescent and on Alfred Road, you go in at night after 8 or 9, there's a group of 20 lads and ladies there who have just got nothing to do, so they'll just go to the shop, they'll go, you go in the morning, run up the road, it's full of the little cans of gas and little glass bottles, and I'll show you what I've seen there every day. So I mean, that's sort of, again, an area. So understanding that referral conversation I'll have with that area, I do think, in a lot of the areas of the borough we're looking at these problems. I think that the service you offer, rather than going down the stick approach of the police just going and turf them off so they go further underground, actually having those conversations, see what we can offer is actually something we really need to be doing. So I think that was really interesting point raised there to look into.
Yeah, so if it came in from other parties, presumably you'd then attempt to access them via the school.
If they're in school, it's not always that they're in school, so it would be via that initial referral person, whoever's referred. Can we get access to the young person? Can you arrange an instruction? Can we have access to the parents' details so we can make contact with the parents and let them know the type of work that we're trying to do?
Great, thank you. Councillor Bansal.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, great presentation. Just thank you for all the work that you're doing. It's great. When all the photos were up, it was great to see some of the smiles, some of the activities that were happening. It's absolutely brilliant. Two questions. Well, one is kind of following on from what Councillor Jones asked about mental health. We know the kind of pandemic increased it, and you had a photo of, I think it was a lady who suffered from anxiety, but you got her back into the gym, etc., and a lot more kind of positivity around the mindset. Even after the pandemic, there's going to be other issues happening, like furloughs ending for many young people. There's other challenges, gas prices rising, ... There's a lot of challenges. Do you see more mental health issues happening? And is it linked with, I guess I know the answer, but linking it with sports activities that you're doing, does that help alleviate some of that mental pressure that some young folk might have?
So in short, yes. It's not always sport, it can just be an activity. So we've recently done some jewellery making with a group of young people, just because they just didn't want to engage in sport. So it was a group of young girls that we had during the summer, and they weren't sporty. We did some walks with them, and actually they did some jewellery making, which we did years ago. And actually they'd seen some pictures and said, we'd like to do that. So we re-engaged with the jewellery maker, brought them in, and away they went, and they'll actually be active at one of the markets coming up. So it was good to see. It's about what the young person wants to do, and if it stimulates their brain and takes them away from where they are to a different place and allows us informally to have different conversations with them, then we'll do that activity.
Yeah, you were just talking about engaging young people informally. Is this encouraged? You were talking about getting the young lads into jobs, etc., or apprenticeships, or sort of like pigeonholing. But what if, do you have like a way of people might come and work with you on a Saturday morning, maybe, or something like that, or normally young kids are going to work with the dad, bricklaying or joinery or something like that. They develop a passion for the job from there, rather than being interviewed and sort of pigeonholed into something. Does that exist?
Yeah, that exists within the Young programme. So the Young programme, primarily it was set up to deliver work experience opportunities.
Right.
And obviously, the pandemic, we had, I think it was up to just above 50 businesses, different types of businesses. And one of the reasons for me really was you've just mentioned, lots of young people have got great contact with the family, and they can get to work experience on whatever they really want to do, whether it's accountancy or bricklaying or whatever it is. Some young people don't have those contacts, and for me, Young provides that, and it gives everyone an opportunity to sample different types of different sectors. So that's exactly what that does, and we're trying to bring that also into the post 16. So those that have got nothing on the CV, and we get people coming into the job club 21, 22, 25 years old, never done a day's work in their life, and we have to try and figure out a way of trying to get them things on the CV to make them employable. So it might be they volunteer at the job club, we can put that on the CV. You know, there's different things that we do. Can we get them volunteering on the program just to try and build them up a little bit, to make them at least seem employable, to get them in the door for an interview? Some of them are great characters and they just need an opportunity.
Yeah. Right, okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Dickman. So again, Mark, just a final point before we wrap up, which is you talked about going to the Royal March Centre, for example. I think in the borough itself, we've got things like the Bingham Leisure Centre being built, we've got the crematorium soon to be built after when the plans go through, and other areas. It'd be great to see, much more work we can do in Rushcliff to introduce these young people to those projects. It's going to be interesting in the future, and also with local business as well. Anything that you think you need from us as council or council to help support the young people with business links, please let us know. It'd be something great to keep working with you, not just a one-way street where we ask you to deliver our service, go, hey, get to that time. I think there's plenty of opportunities we can work on. And again, I think Councillor Williams summed up really well, which was around the thanking you and your team. Again, really want to make that point. I think I would like to formally write to you to thank you, I think, on behalf of the council. I think absolutely what you've done over the course of the pandemic and to the wider context since 2009, I just say from the early stage where we are now, I think it just shows the commitment you've made to the partnership. It needs to be just a step away for a few months ago. Pandemic, we can't be involved. We'll start up at the end. We haven't shown that commitment, which we really appreciate. So thank you very much. So, Councillor Bergeron.
Forgive me, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps you didn't see my arm earlier on. When you were at primary school running around playground in shorts, there was a character that Harry Enfield played, Kevin, and his parents didn't understand it. And I just wanted to add my thanks to Mark and his team, because we've seen the ideas that you came up with and the events that you've shared with the group of kids that you've worked with. But what for me, actually, what is perhaps too easy to miss is that age group. I know Kevin, the character, was obviously an extreme caricature, but it is a difficult age, and I just want to add my thanks, and I'm sure many others in Bingham and elsewhere have seen you and your team make a tremendous difference to a very difficult age group. And I think, Mr. Chairman, that the impact is not only immediate, the impact is years onwards. And they will remember you and your colleagues by name, and will say to their kids, hopefully, that if it wasn't for you, they'd be on a different track. So thanks very much. And I just want to add, Mr. Chairman, that use all the resources, and I realise it's going to be extremely difficult, probably over the next 5-10 years, maybe. Who knows what we're going to be facing in the next few years. But the county councillors have got funding themselves, not a lot, 5,000 each year. But it may make a difference for one-off events that you want to create for your groups, and we'd be absolutely delighted to assist, along with our, of course, the borough colleagues who also have a small pot to add to one-off events.
If you ask Mark twice about funding, he's going to be straight on the phone to you after the meeting now. So, no, thanks, Councillor Bergeron. Great point to raise. So, we go to any first speakers. I think everyone's had a chance to speak, which we really appreciate the the introduction of this item. So to recap on the recommendations, consider and make comments to the presentation, which we've done, endorse the work of Positive Future and Young Projects, and consider further areas of exploration how we provide services to children and young people in light of COVID pandemic. And we cover those in great detail. So I'm going to propose that we pass all 3 recommendations. All in favour? All right, so thank you very much. And Mark, once again, thank you for your wasting your time this evening, very much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, so for this work programme, just 2 quick things to go over. So from the previous item on policing, we discussed the recommendation, actually the formal vote on the end. Just want to make sure we get that for the minutes before Laura tells me off. So it is recommended that the Community Scrutiny Group consider and make comments on the performance of the police and the wider community support partnership during 2020-21 within Rushcliff, and provide suggestions on the priorities of the year ahead. I believe we all did that. So just for the record, just get all in favour or against. Thank you. So before we go on to minutes, I want to introduce really actions to the previous meeting going forward. So I know there's quite a few actions raised. So I think I'm going to go to Darryl, who's just going to go over those to give you an update where we are to make sure we do that going forwards. Darryl.
Thank you, Chair. So just again, just for Laura's benefit and the minutes, so we're sort of fully covered those 5 actions from the previous meeting. It was requested that an update on the carbon management plan be circulated to members of the group. It was done by email. I understand that it was maybe quite difficult to read on the email, so at request of some members, you'll be provided with a paper copy as well this evening. Officers have to contact all local volunteer groups to ensure they know how to report antisocial behaviour. That was done. Likewise, there was an article placed in Council Connections on how members may sign up to the Not Safeguarding website. So 3 of the 5 actions are fully completed. The 2 outstanding, and I use the word outstanding in the fact that we have done as much as we can so far. Officers have been in contact with County Council colleagues in relation to looking at what signage we can potentially put up our community facilities, and also what training may be available for people that want to hire those community facilities. We've had nothing back from the county yet, but we will be chasing them to make sure those 2 actions are complete. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Go forward to do that with all the actions. Councillor James.
Can I just comment? I hasten to apologise for being critical, but yes, it wasn't very visible on the website, but now it is visible. I still don't understand it, and I'd like to be able to understand it.
Okay, so yeah, absolutely. So what I will make contact after the meeting so we can get that looked into with the new lead on the. I know we've had a change in the officer recently on that, so we'll get that looked at. And any other member who again got a question that, please go to Darryl and to Derek too, or read that up and make sure we get the correct information. Thank you. Okay, so on to the final things this evening, which is just the work programme. So as you'll see, for 27th of January 2022, so a bit of a gap between now and then, we've got the housing delivery plan, community facilities and assets, for the 28th of April 2022, carbon management plan, and vision the waste strategy. And that's been pushed a couple of times, also waiting for the waste strategy to come through from government. So we're hoping it'll be any time now, though we've been saying that for a while, so we'll keep saying that. But so provisioning that date, obviously that may have to be moved depending on, but there's at least be an update to that point if nothing else where we are. Obviously, as always, the work programme, it can change depending on what comes from the corporate overview group. I made it clear, for example, we don't have the issue from last time. We need to be looking at the meeting dates and cycles, so we don't have an issue where we suddenly have something taken off our agenda a couple of weeks ago and we can't replace it. That's not on. We need to have enough time to look at for the group here to comment if there's anything else they want in the work programme. So any comments on that before we proceed? Councillor Manager.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I don't know if it still comes here, and I'm not saying we should definitely bring it here again, but we've talked about sort of online issues, things like that, and there's inclusion. And we have in the past talked about the broadband rollout across the borough and had that on scrutiny. Even if we don't bring it back to this body, is that still something that's being looked at another scrutiny group? Or if it's not going to a scrutiny group, maybe we can just have an update on what the situation is.
I'm not aware we're going for a major item. David might be more information on that.
Chair, I think the topic is still being looked at closely and would be going to growth and development, if anything, because obviously a lot of the main linkage was around sort of the importance of broadband and the not spots. I think we've talked about those at length in the past, but yeah, I mean, if it's something that's still of interest, then there's always an opportunity to fill out a scrutiny matrix and put it forward for consideration by COG, and I imagine it would end up at the Growth and Development Scrutiny Group.
That's fine, as long as it's being picked up and still being sort of checked, because we don't want sort of these areas like the not spots, as you say. We do want to sort of make sure those are sort of ironed out, as it were. But we also want to make sure that we don't just stay at the level that we are. We want to see sort of a faster broadband service that's still fit going into the future. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mann, and I say if it does go through scrutiny matrix to Warrant Group, sure myself, Councillor Mansell, more happy to put those comments on your behalf to that to make sure it falls into part of that going forwards. Thank you. Any other questions or comments, Councillor Walker?
When's the next COG meeting? Do they meet before this, or we still got this issue then that if COG might meet between now and January?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is obviously the meeting cycle is agreed up until May, so it's from May going forwards when we can actually fully implement the change our dates. But what I've made absolutely clear going forwards is I don't want to find out at corporate overview group that this item potentially come off. If it's going to, if there's an issue with an item, we know in far enough advance, then I can have that discussion, find exactly why. Because when we just find out straight at a meeting, there's not much opportunity to have that discussion to question. I mean, the item that came up before, the reason was because it was going to be part of a wider piece of work being looked at, which please come back actually on the community facility and assets. That was the item, if I remember correctly, wasn't it? Yeah. So that was the reason why it wasn't just gone completely. There was some more work officers wanted to do to put it together with another piece of work to come back. So it wasn't just a removal, it was a pushback because of X, Y, and Z reasons. But as I say, it has that impact on our work programme, means there's not that chance for yourselves to discuss it. So from May going forwards and the new calendar of meetings goes forwards, we can absolutely make sure it's done with that in mind in terms of the gap between the corporate overview and the communities. I think it was just there was a couple of meetings pushed around because of the pandemic, everything else just created that, I say, perfect storm, just inconvenience where there was just not enough time. I think it was 3 weeks, I remember correctly, between the corporate overview group and the community. So yes, point I've made clear on behalf of the group, you want to make sure that yourselves have that opportunity to come in the work programme. We don't just get something, although obviously I hope you appreciate this and that round for people to look at. I absolutely agree we need to do that in a formal setting of the meeting that we can do and be accountable to the public as well. So yeah, obviously going forward, Councillor Walker, whatever we can do to make sure that it's on that big end we're doing. Go on, Laura.
It's just to say that the next corporate overview group meeting is on the 2nd of November.
So there should be a good amount, well, say there should be a good amount of time between that and the meeting to find out a reason why. But I've not had any indication there's going to be any problem with those two items on there, unless there's anything that, Daryl, you want to raise that you're aware of? No. Okay, so I can't see any reason why it wouldn't be those items, but if there is a reason, I'll find out why. And also before the corporate overview group, I'll make sure I contact all of you individually to say there's reasons so we can have any input for yourselves I can raise in that meeting as well. Same with Councillor Mansell. Okay. Right, then, so all in favour? It's recommended that the group agrees to work programme set up below. All in favour? Okay, one down. Okay, well, I know it's been a long evening, so really appreciate everyone's time this evening and look forward to seeing you all in January. I won't wish you Merry Christmas, I'll get things thrown at me, but I'll see you in January. Thanks very much. Meeting closed.